Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku took Superman's place in the Injustice timeline. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The sunlight that filtered through the panoramic windows of their metropolis apartment always seemed different. It was warmer, more golden than the light he remembered from Yuzurifu. It was the light of a new morning, a new life. Izuku Midoriya, known to this world as the Emerald Comet, Deku, floated a few inches off the polished hardwood floor, savoring the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. One mug, painted with a cartoonish All Might, hovered near his lips. The other, a sleek ceramic piece decorated with constellations, drifted gently across the living room to Lena. "Careful, fly boy," she murmured, not looking up from the datapad in her lap. Her dark hair was a glorious mess, piled loosely on her head, and she was cocooned in one of his old, ridiculously oversized plus ultra hoodies. "Last time you did that, you used a bit too much FA Jean and the Dean DeLuca ended up redecorating the ceiling." A soft chuckle escaped him, the green lightning that perpetually danced in his irises softening to a gentle glow. "That was years ago. My control is better now." He nudged the mug closer to her hand with a whisper of telekinetic force, a small, subtle application of Black Whip's tendrils, now so fine they were invisible to the naked eye. Lena finally looked up, her own eyes, a warm, intelligent brown, crinkling at the corners. She took the mug, her fingers brushing against the invisible field holding it. "I know. It's just fun to remind you of your calamitous rookie days." She took a sip, a contented sigh escaping her. "You're a good man, Izuku Midoriya. And you make a great cup of coffee." He floated over, settling onto the couch beside her, and wrapping his arms around her, hoodie and all. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling the scent of her shampoo, something floral and uniquely Lena. For 3 years, this had been his anchor. After the dimensional tear, the confusion, the loneliness of being a hero in a world not his own, Lena had been the one to see past the godlike power and find the nervous, analytical boy underneath. An archivist at the Metropolis Museum of Natural History, she was grounded in a way that balanced his flight. She dealt in fossils and facts, he dealt in aliens and Armageddon. It worked. "What are you looking at?" He mumbled into her hair. "Baby names," she said, her voice a little too casual. She angled the datapad towards him. It was a long list, a chaotic jumble of Earth names and a few hesitant Japanese ones he'd suggested. "I'm vetoing Tashinori. It's a wonderful sentiment, my love, but our kid is not going to have to live up to 2 symbols of peace and hope before they can even walk." He grinned. "Fair enough. How about Katsuki?" Lena swatted his arm playfully. "Absolutely not. You've told me the stories. I'm not naming our child after your explosive childhood bully, no matter how much you two have reconciled in your head." She scrolled down the list. "I was thinking about something classic. Maybe Samuel? Or if it's a girl, Eleanor?" He looked at the names, then at her, at the gentle curve of her stomach just beginning to show beneath the thick fabric of the hoodie. A feeling of such profound, overwhelming love swelled in his chest that it felt like One for All activating at 1,000,000%. This was it. This was the future he was fighting for, the reason he threw himself in front of death rays and collapsing buildings. Not for some grand, abstract concept of justice, but for this. For Lena. For Eleanor. He leaned in and kissed her, soft and slow. "Eleanor Midoriya," he whispered against her lips. "I like the sound of that." Her hand came up to cup his cheek, her thumb tracing the faint scars there. "Me too," a soft chime echoed from his comms unit on the coffee table. A low-level alert. He sighed. "Go," she said, already pushing him gently. "Go be a hero. Just come back for dinner. I'm making that lasagna you like, promise," he said, giving her one last, lingering kiss. He phased through his civilian clothes, his hero costume materializing around him in a swirl of green energy. "I love you, I know," she smiled. "I love you too. Now go stop a runaway train or something." He shot her a blindingly bright smile, the one the Daily Planet had plastered on a dozen front pages, the one that had earned him his moniker as this world's symbol of hope. With a quiet whoosh, he was gone, a green streak ascending into the golden metropolis sky. The incident was on the Seagull Bridge. A multi-car pileup during morning rush hour had compromised a support pylon. The entire western span was groaning, threatening to plunge hundreds of commuters into the churning waters of the Hobbs Neck River. Izuku arrived in a heartbeat, a silent green comet. He didn't announce his presence with a booming declaration. That was more Clark's style. He simply got to work. Okay, structural integrity failing at stress points gamma and delta 7. Rebar is shearing. Torsional force is at 97% of breaking strain. He muttered, his mind a whirlwind of physics and engineering calculations. One for all wasn't just strength. It was a torrent of sensory information he'd learned to process at impossible speeds. Danger sense wasn't just a spider sense for attacks. It was a precognitive, analytical tool that screamed at him about weak points and probabilities. Black whip erupted from his back and arms, not as thick, punishing tendrils, but as 1,000 fine, dark green threads. They wove through the bridge's superstructure, creating a massive, intricate support lattice that took the strain off the failing pylon. It was like emergency suturing on a colossal scale. He hovered above the fray, a conductor orchestrating a symphony of salvation. With precise applications of float and his raw strength, he gently lifted a school bus that was teetering precariously on the edge, setting it down on the stable part of the bridge. Children pressed their faces against the windows, their expressions of terror melting into awe. One little girl, no older than 7, wearing a t-shirt with his emblem on it, waved frantically. He gave her a reassuring nod and a quick thumbs up before turning his attention back to the crisis. He could hear the sirens approaching, but the first responders were still minutes away. He was the only thing holding this catastrophe at bay. All right, Midoriya. A familiar, wry voice crackled in his ear. Trying to put the Army Corps of Engineers out of a job, Lois? He grunted, the strain evident in his voice as he adjusted the tension on his black-whipped lattice. Just another Tuesday. Looks a little more than a Tuesday from up here, Lois Lane replied. He could hear the thrum of a helicopter's rotors in the background. The planet's sending its best. Which is me, obviously. Clark's off-world dealing with a Thanagarian trade dispute. Said something about it being less stressful than his last interview with Lex Luthor. Izuku smiled. He and Lois had formed an unlikely, powerful bond. She'd been the first reporter to interview him after his arrival, and instead of treating him like a threat or a messiah, she treated him like a scared, superpowered kid a long way from home. She was the tough, no-nonsense older sister he'd never had. Tell him I don't envy him, Izuku said, gritting his teeth as he felt another support cable snap. He poured more power into Black Whip, the dark energy humming around him. Lois, I need to set this section down. The whole thing is going to go. Can you make sure your chopper gets everyone to back off? Already on it, Green Bean, she said, her tone all business. Be careful. He took a deep breath, focusing the immense power of One for All. Slowly, with excruciating control, he began to lower the entire damaged span of the Seagull Bridge. It was a weight that would have crushed mountains, but he guided it into the river with the care of a surgeon, minimizing the splash, preventing a tidal surge that could have damaged the shoreline. The sound was deafening, a groan of tortured metal and a final, explosive splash, but not a single car or person went with it. He floated there for a moment, breathing heavily, as police boats and fire rescue teams swarmed the scene. The people on the bridge were cheering, chanting his name. Deku! 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 He waved once more before streaking away, a blur of green against the blue sky. The adoration was nice, but it always made him a little uncomfortable. He wasn't doing this for applause. He was doing it for quiet mornings with Lena and debates over baby names. The watchtower was a silent sentinel in the void, a monument to hope and vigilance. Docking his javelin, Izuku walked through the gleaming corridors, nodding at the other heroes he passed. Captain Adam gave him a respectful nod. Flash zipped by, offering a cheerful, "Hey, Isaac!" As he went, he found Bruce in the training room, mercilessly pounding a holographic combat drone into digital oblivion. "Rough morning?" Izuku asked, leaning against the doorframe. Batman deactivated the simulation, the holographic ninja dissipating into pixels. He turned, his cowl masking his expression as always, but Izuku could read the tension in his shoulders. Joker's out, Bruce said, his voice a low growl. Escaped Arkham last night. Harley Quinn with him. Izuku's blood ran cold. Of all the villains in this new universe, the Joker was the one he understood the least. He wasn't like Shigaraki or All for One, who sought power or destruction for a tangible, if twisted, purpose. The Joker was an agent of pure, nihilistic chaos. He couldn't be analyzed, couldn't be predicted. He was a gaping hole in the fabric of logic. Any leads? Izuku asked, his posture shifting from relaxed to combat-ready. None. He's gone to ground. It's too quiet, Bruce said, walking over to a console. He pulled up a map of Gotham, 100 alerts and data points flashing across the screen. He's planning something big. I can feel it. I'll help you search, Izuku offered immediately. I can cover more ground. No, Batman cut him off. It wasn't a harsh dismissal, but a tactical one. He'll be expecting me in Gotham. He knows our dance. You're a wild card. He knows your power, but he doesn't know you, not like he knows me or Clark. That makes you both a target and an advantage. Stay in Metropolis. Keep the city safe. Be the shield. If he makes a move there, you'll be the first to know. Izuku nodded, respecting the grim logic. He and Bruce had a strange relationship. It was built on a foundation of mutual, hard-won respect. Bruce was wary of his immense power, but he trusted his incorruptible character. Izuku was in awe of Bruce's intellect and iron will, seeing him as a quirkless hero who had surpassed all limits, a darker reflection of All Might's legacy. I ran that simulation you designed for me, Izuku said, changing the subject slightly. The one with the nanite swarm, and I beat it. Used a city-wide electromagnetic pulse generated by a controlled FA gene kinetic loop and contained the fallout with a smokescreen bubble. A flicker of something. Surprise? Approval crossed Bruce's exposed jaw. Impressive. You're learning to think beyond just punching things. Coming from Batman, it was the highest praise. I had a good teacher, Izuku said earnestly. A blaring, high-priority alarm suddenly screamed through the watchtower, its crimson light washing over them. On the main monitor, a live feed appeared. The Metropolis shipyards. Thick, noxious-looking green and purple smoke was billowing from a freighter docked at Pier 12. It's him, Bruce growled. I've got it, Izuku said, his body already crackling with green energy. Izuku, wait! It's a trap, Batman warned, his voice urgent. Don't go in alone. Wait for backup. There's no time. Izuku shot back, his eyes fixed on the screen. The smoke was spreading, nearing a populated area. People are in danger. I have to go. He shot Bruce a determined look. I'll be careful. Before Batman could argue further, Izuku was a blur, rocketing out of the watchtower and streaking towards Earth, a green missile aimed at the heart of Metropolis. He sent a quick, encrypted text to Lena. Gotta go. Something big at the shipyards. I love you. Be back soon. Her reply was instantaneous. I know. Kick some clown but for me. Love you more. He smiled. It was the last time he would. The scene at the shipyards was unnervingly silent. The thick, acrid smoke hung heavy in the air, smelling of chemicals and burnt sugar, a sickeningly sweet perfume of chaos. Danger Sense was screaming at him, a high-pitched whine in the back of his skull, but it was unfocused, chaotic. The entire area was a threat. He landed on the deck of the freighter, the laughing gas. The silence was the most terrifying part. No screaming civilians, no cackling henchmen, just the lapping of the waves and the eerie groan of the ship's hull. Well, well, well! Look what the cat dragged in! A voice, slick with theatrical madness, echoed from a loudspeaker. It's the new boy! The Green Machine! Here to save the day with the power of friendship and feelings, the Joker. He stepped out from behind a stack of shipping containers, his purple suit immaculate, a sickly yellow flower on his lapel. Harley Quinn was at his side, holding a comically oversized mallet, but her usual manic grin was absent, replaced by a nervous, twitchy energy. What do you want, Joker? Izuku's voice was steady, belying the storm in his mind. He scanned the area, cataloging every detail, every escape route, every potential weapon. Want? Oh, I don't want anything, kiddo. The Joker giggled, spreading his arms wide. Wanting is so pedestrian. I'm a man of taste. And I've been tasting this new flavor you've brought to town. Hope, optimism, sincerity. It's all so terribly boring. He took a step forward, his movements like a jerky marionette. See, I had this whole big gag planned for the big blue Boy Scout. A real showstopper. A one bad day away kind of joke. But he's out of town. So rude. But then I thought, why let a good punchline go to waste? And you, my dear boy, you're the perfect substitute. All that power, wound up tight with all that goody-two-shoes morality. I bet if I push you, you'll make a much funnier snap. Izuku's fists clenched. It's over. Surrender. The Joker threw his head back and laughed, a sound that scraped at the soul. Over? Oh, sweetie. The show is just getting started. With a flick of his wrist, he pressed a button. Vents on the deck of the ship hissed open, and the green and purple smoke began to pour out, thicker now, more concentrated. A little something I cooked up with a helping hand from my old pal Scarecrow. Joker chirped. With a few of my own special ingredients, of course. A little kryptonite dust for the original guest of honor. But for you? I figured I'd have to get a little more personal. Izuku held his breath, but it was too late. The toxin wasn't just a gas. It was a microscopic aerosol, already absorbed through his skin. The world began to tilt, the edges blurring as if he were looking through water. The Joker's laughter distorted, deepening into a sound he hadn't heard in years, a sound that haunted the deepest recesses of his nightmares. His vision swam. The purple of the Joker's suit bled away, replaced by a severe, immaculate black. The pale, scarred face morphed, the bones shifting, the green hair darkening. The manic grin was gone, replaced by a condescending, terrifyingly familiar sneer. The breathing apparatus clicked into place over a face with no eyes, only sockets of chilling darkness. All for one stood before him. You thought you could escape me? The monster's voice echoed in his head, a sound that was both heard and felt, a violation of his very consciousness. You thought another dimension could hide you from your master? How naive! You are a vessel, Izuku Midoriya. Nothing more. And I have come to collect? No! Izuku gasped, stumbling back. This couldn't be real. It was the toxin. He knew it was the toxin. But the fear was absolute, bypassing all logic, all reason. It was a primal terror that had been etched into his DNA. The world around him dissolved. The shipyards, the water, the sky, it all melted away into the shattered ruins of Kamino Ward. Flames licked at broken buildings. He could feel the heat, smell the ash. You've grown strong. All for one mused, taking a slow, deliberate step towards him. Black and red tendrils, a perversion of his own black whip, snaked from the villain's back. One for all has ripened nicely in you. But you are still just a boy. A crying child who thinks a strong punch can solve everything. But you can't punch this, can you? The villain gestured, and from the shadows behind him, he dragged a figure. Lena. Her eyes were wide with terror. She was bound in the same red and black tendrils. Izuku! She cried, her voice strained. Let her go! Izuku roared, green lightning exploding from his body. He lunged, but all for one was faster, sidestepping with contemptuous ease. You brought me here. All for one hissed, his voice a venomous whisper in Izuku's ear. Your very presence was a beacon that led me to this ripe, untouched world. Everyone who dies here, every city that turns to ash, it will be because you exist. Her death will be your fault. Izuku, stand down! It's the toxin! Batman's voice crackled over his calm, but it was warped, twisted by the hallucination. In his ears, it was all for one's voice, mocking him. You see? Even your friends know you're a failure. All for one began to rise into the air, pulling a terrified Lena with him. I will take her, and I will take your power. And then I will unmake this world in your name. No, no, he would not let it happen again. He would not fail. Not again. Not Lena. Not his new world. All rational thought vanished, replaced by a single, desperate, all-consuming imperative: get him away. Get him away from the planet. With a scream of pure, unadulterated power, Izuku launched himself into the sky. He was no longer a hero. He was a weapon, a guided missile of grief and fear. He slammed into the phantom of All for One, wrapping his arms around the monstrous form that held his wife. He flew, up, breaking the sound barrier a dozen times over. The city shrank beneath him into a grid of lights. The sky turned from blue to indigo to the black velvet of the void. The wind's roar died away into absolute silence. The burning in his lungs from the lack of oxygen was a distant, unimportant sensation. He had to get him away. He had to save them. He flew higher, the curve of the earth a breathtaking jewel below. And then, in the sterile, absolute clarity of space, the toxin began to release its grip. The cold of the void shocked his system. The phantom pain of Kamino's flames vanished. The monstrous, oppressive presence of All for One faded. The illusion shattered like glass. He was in the silent darkness of orbit, and he was holding Lena. She was in his arms, her eyes wide not with terror of a villain, but with confusion and fear of him. The black and red tendrils were gone. It was just his arms, wrapped around her so tightly he must be hurting her. Izuku! She gasped, her voice thin and reedy in the vacuum, transmitted only through the contact of their bodies. What's happening? I can't breathe. His blood turned to ice. He looked down, his mind catching up to the horror his body had wrought. He saw her face, turning blue from asphyxiation. He saw the genuine, terrified love in her eyes, and he saw the small, digital device strapped to her wrist. A heart rate monitor, with a garish, smiling Joker face painted on it. A flat, rhythmic beep echoed in his calms. Her heartbeat. Steady. Faltering. Beep. 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 Beep, he understood. The Joker's voice, no longer distorted, but crystal clear and merry, crackled to life in his ear. And for my next trick, Izuku's eyes, wide with a dawning, world-ending horror, met Lena's. He tried to speak, to scream, to explain, but no sound came out. Her eyes fluttered. A single tear froze on her cheek. Aizu! The beeping stopped. A flat line. For one perfect, terrible second, there was only silence. The silence of space. The silence of a stopped heart. And then, from the city below him, a light brighter than the sun. He didn't hear the explosion. He saw it. A silent, cancerous flower of fire and radiation blooming from the heart of Metropolis, wiping the city he called home off the face of the planet. The shockwave, a phantom ripple in the void, washed over him, a ghost of the force that had just vaporized millions of people. His people. Their future. Their daughter Eleanor. He floated in the darkness, holding the lifeless body of his wife, silhouetted against the funeral pyre of his city. The symbol of hope was dead. The emerald comet had burned out. Something inside him, the bright, hopeful core that had survived a quirkless childhood, that had been forged by All Might, that had inspired a world, it didn't just break. It atomized. He opened his mouth. In the absolute silence of space, where no sound can travel, Izuku Midoriya screamed. It was a soundless cry of such pure, undiluted agony that it manifested as a physical force, a wave of raw energy, of green lightning and unleashed grief that billowed out from him, causing the very stars around him to seem to flicker and dim in mourning. Gotham City wept. The rain was a permanent fixture, a constant, miserable drizzle that washed the grime from the gargoyles only to deposit it in the gutters. It was a city in perpetual mourning for an innocence it never had, and tonight, its sorrow felt like a shroud suffocating the world. Inside the sterile, concrete heart of the Gotham City Police Department Major Crimes Unit, the rain was a distant, rhythmic drumming against reinforced windows, a funereal percussion for the horror that had unfolded. The interrogation room was cold. Not just in temperature, but in a deep, bone-aching way that no thermostat could fix. It smelled of stale coffee, antiseptic, and despair. On one side of a steel table, bolted to the floor, sat the architect of that despair. The Joker was a splash of lurid color in the monochrome room, his purple suit stained and damp, his green hair plastered to his chalk-white face. He wasn't cuffed to the table. He was strapped into a restrained chair, but he sat with the languid posture of a king upon his throne. A triumphant, bloody-lipped smirk was painted across his features. On the other side stood Batman. He was a pillar of darkness, a void in the harsh fluorescent light. His cowl was angled down, hiding his eyes, but the rigid set of his jaw betrayed a fury so profound it seemed to generate its own gravitational pull. For an hour, he had said nothing. He had simply stood there, letting the silence become a weapon. But against the Joker, silence was just an empty stage awaiting a monologue. "You know, Batsy," the Joker began, his voice a gravelly, theatrical purr. "The key to a good joke is timing. And delivery. People always forget the delivery." He wriggled his fingers, the only part of him with any freedom. "Take Metropolis. A city of tomorrow. All shiny and optimistic. It was a terrible audience. No sense of irony." He chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "But you have to commit to the bit. You have to really deliver the punchline." Behind the one-way mirror, in the darkened observation room, the remnants of the Justice League stood vigil. Each of them was an island of grief. Diana Prince, Wonder Woman, stood with her arms crossed, her regal face a mask of stone. But her eyes, ancient and full of sorrow, betrayed a pain that resonated with the loss of ages. She had seen empires fall and gods die, yet the calculated cruelty of this act felt uniquely profane. Barry Allen, the Flash, vibrated slightly on the spot, a nervous tic he couldn't control. He kept looking from the Joker to the empty space in the interrogation room, his mind racing, processing the sheer scale of the loss, millions of lives, a friend's entire world, all extinguished for a joke. It was a horror too vast to outrun. Hal Jordan, Green Lantern, leaned against the wall, his jaw tight. His ring finger twitched, the emerald light of his power ring suppressed but not dormant. As a former test pilot and a current space cop, he was a man of action, of calculated risks and direct confrontations. This was different. This was watching a lit fuse burn down, knowing the bomb at the end was their friend's soul. It was a masterpiece. The Joker continued, his voice rising with theatrical fervor. A symphony of sorrow, the fear toxin, the kryptonite infusion just to sell the illusion, the heartbeat monitor. Oh, the heartbeat monitor. That was my little chef's kiss. A love that literally blows up in your face. He howled with laughter, a raw, unhinged sound that clawed at the walls. He thought he was fighting his big bad bogeyman. The Joker leaned forward as much as his restraints would allow, his eyes gleaming with malevolent insight. He thought he was saving the world, and in that one, perfect, crystal-clear moment in the cold and quiet of space, he got the joke. He realized he wasn't the hero. He was the punchline. Batman's gloved hand slammed down on the table. The sound was like a gunshot, echoing in the small room. The steel tabletop, an inch of solid metal, now bore the distinct five-fingered impression of his knuckles. "Where did you get the toxin, Joker?" Batman's voice was a low, terrifying growl, stripped of all theatrics. It was the sound of the abyss staring back. "Oh, a little of this, a little of that." The Joker waved a dismissive hand. "A dash of Crane, a sprinkle of my own special sauce. The real question, Bats, isn't about the ingredients, it's about the philosophy." I proved my point. Again. All it takes is one bad day to reduce the sanest man alive to lunacy. And him? The big green Boy Scout? I think his day was a little worse than just bad, don't you? He grinned, a wide, predatory slash of red and white. "So, the real question is, where is he? I'm dying to hear the review. I bet it'll be a killer." As if summoned by the question, the lights in the room flickered. Not just in the interrogation room, but throughout the entire floor. A low hum vibrated through the concrete, a sound that felt less like an electrical surge and more like the air itself was being compressed. The rhythmic drumming of the rain outside seemed to stop. The world held its breath. The reinforced steel door to the interrogation room didn't open. It buckled, torn from its hinges as if it were made of wet cardboard, and crashed against the far wall. In the doorway stood Izuka Midoriya. The observation room fell silent. Barry stopped vibrating. Hal pushed himself off the wall. Diana's breath hitched. They had all seen him in battle, a whirlwind of heroic energy, his face alight with fierce determination. This was not that person. The boy, and he looked so terribly young right now, was a ghost haunting the shell of a hero. His costume was shredded, smeared with the dust and ash of a dead city. His face was pale, almost translucent, save for the dark, tear-like tracks that stained his cheeks, carved through the grime. But his eyes were the epicenter of the horror. They were no longer the vibrant, hopeful emeralds that had graced magazine covers. They were hollowed-out pits of desolation, and deep within them, a storm of green lightning churned with apocalyptic rage. The air around him crackled with ozone. The pressure in the room dropped, making it hard to breathe. It was like standing in the path of a hurricane that had gained sentience. He took a step into the room, and the floor creaked under a weight far greater than his physical body. The Joker's smile, for the first time, faltered. His eyes widened, not with fear, but with ecstatic, feverish anticipation. He was a scientist about to witness the cataclysmic result of his grand experiment. "There he is!" the Joker breathed, his voice filled with a sick paternal pride. "The man of the hour!" Izuku didn't look at him. His deadened eyes were fixed on Batman. For a long, silent moment, the two heroes stared at each other. One was a man who had weaponized his darkness to fight the monsters. The other was a boy of pure light who had just been thrown into a black hole. "Leave, Bruce," Izuku said. His voice was unrecognizable. It was a flat, toneless rasp, the sound of a voice box torn raw from a scream that had lasted an eternity. Batman didn't move. "Izuku. Don't." It wasn't a command. It was a plea. He was pleading not for the Joker's life, but for Izuku's soul. "I said," Izuku repeated, taking another slow, deliberate step. "Leave." This time, the words were underscored by a surge of power. The lights didn't just flicker, they exploded in showers of sparks. The one-way mirror separating the rooms cracked, a spiderweb of fractures emanating from the center. In the observation room, the heroes stumbled back. The sheer, raw, untamed pressure of his grief-fueled quirk was a physical assault. "Let's go," Diana said, her voice grim. She placed a hand on Barry's shoulder. "This is not for us to witness. We can't just leave him," Barry protested, his voice tight with panic. "We cannot stop him either," she replied, her gaze fixed on the cracked mirror, on the silhouette of the broken boy within. "Whatever he does in this room, he must do it. We can only hope the man we know is still in there." Reluctantly, they backed away, evacuating the observation room. Only Batman remained, a final, defiant shadow standing between a broken god and his devil. "He is mine, Bruce," Izuku whispered, his eyes finally shifting from Batman to the figure in the chair. Batman saw the abyss in the boy's eyes. He saw the point of no return. He had spent his life holding that line, defining himself by it. But he also knew that his own grief, his own tragedy, was a flickering candle next to the supernova of loss that had consumed Izuku. With a final, heavy sigh of defeat, Batman turned. He walked past Izuku, the air around the boy so charged it felt like walking through static electricity. He didn't look back. As the door swung shut behind him, he knew he was leaving more than just a boy and a monster in that room. He was leaving behind the world as it was. Now they were alone. Izuku stood before the table, his shadow falling over the Joker. The clown's smile returned, wider and more manic than ever. He stared up at the embodiment of his triumph. "So? How was it?" the Joker asked, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Did she have any last words? Was it romantic? Tragic?" "I do love a good tragedy." Izuku said nothing. The green lightning in his eyes intensified, arcs of power beginning to leak from his body, crawling across his skin like incandescent veins. "Oh, don't give me the silent treatment," the Joker chided, pouting. "After all I did for you. I gave you a gift. I gave you freedom. The freedom that comes from realizing it's all just one big, meaningless, cosmic joke. You're finally free from the burden of hope, from the Sisyphean task of saving everyone. You should be thanking me." Izuku raised his head, and for the first time, the Joker saw the full, undiluted storm of his agony. It was not the righteous anger of a hero. It was the nihilistic fury of a shattered universe. "You took everything." Izuku's voice was a low tremor, the sound of tectonic plates grinding together. "No, no, no!" The Joker waggled his finger. "I didn't take anything. I just revealed the truth. In a world this mad, the only sane response is to go mad with it. I just gave you the push. You're one of us now. Dark green energy, shot through with black, began to coalesce around Izuku's arms. Black whip. But this wasn't the controlled, precise tool he used for rescue. This was a manifestation of his rage. The tendrils were thick as pythons, thorny and unstable, dripping with an energy that seemed to suck the very light from the room. They shot out, not at the Joker, but at the restrained chair. They wrapped around the steel, and with an ear-splitting shriek of tearing metal, ripped the chair from its bolts on the floor. The Joker yelped in surprise as he was lifted into the air, held aloft and powerless, cocooned in a cage of pure, dark power. Izuku walked closer, until he was inches from the Joker's suspended form. He could smell the cheap makeup, the sweat, the cloying scent of madness. You talk about punchlines, Izuku rasped, the lightning in his eyes now a constant, terrifying blaze. You think this is a joke? He raised his right hand. The familiar, comforting green glow of One for All enveloped it, crackling with a power that could shatter moons. It was the hand that had saved thousands, the hand that had emulated his idol, the hand that Lena had held just this morning while they talked about their future. He drew his fist back. This was it. The moment. The culmination of the Joker's art. The ultimate punchline. In his mind's eye, a floodgate of memories broke. Lena smiling, her hand on her stomach. Eleanor Midoriya. I like the sound of that. The power in his fist surged, vibrating with killing intent. The light from the explosion, silent and absolute. A city of ghosts. His knuckles were white, his muscles screaming with tension. Her face blue in the vacuum of space. The last frozen tear. Her final, whispered. Aizu, he was going to do it. He was going to erase this stain from existence. He was going to reach into this man's chest and crush the heart that had stopped his wife's. The world would be better for it. Safer. It was justice. It was vengeance. It was the only thing left. The Joker watched, his eyes wide, a genuine, ecstatic tear tracing a path through his makeup. Do it, he whispered, his voice trembling with glee. Do it. Make me a martyr. Make it funny. Izuku's arm tensed, ready to deliver the final, world-changing blow. And then, another voice. A memory, softer but more powerful than all the rage. It's fine now. Why? Because I am here, a vision of all might, skeletal and frail, standing against all for one. His body was broken, his power fading, but his smile, that indomitable, heroic smile remained. A hero. All Might's voice echoed in his memory, from that day on the rooftop that felt a lifetime ago. Is someone who saves people. That's all, but you have to save them with a smile, to show them that you're not afraid. He looked at his own reflection in the Joker's wide, insane eyes. He saw a monster. A face contorted with hate, with rage. There was no smile. There was no hope. There was only an abyss. Killing him wouldn't bring Lena back. It wouldn't rebuild Metropolis. It wouldn't save the millions who were now dust. It would only do one thing. It would prove the Joker right. It would be the final, hilarious punchline to the joke that his life had become. It would make him a murderer. It would make him, the Joker. His fist, crackling with enough power to level the building, trembled. The lightning flickered, sputtered. The inferno of his rage met the bedrock of his soul, the unshakable foundation All Might had built within him. With a ragged, guttural sob, a sound of something fundamental inside him breaking in a different way, he stopped. The killing intent vanished, replaced by something colder. Something more terrifying. He lowered his fist. The Joker's ecstatic expression faltered, replaced by confusion, and then, for the first time, a flicker of genuine fear. This wasn't in the script. No, the Joker whispered. No, that's not the joke. You're supposed to break. You're supposed to kill me. That's the punchline. Izuku looked at him, his eyes now terrifyingly clear, devoid of the raging storm. They held only a chilling, absolute certainty. Killing you is too easy, he said, his voice a dead, hollow thing. It's a release. It's what you want. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than any scream. It won't bring them back. It would just make me you. The Joker started to laugh, a nervous, desperate sound. So what? You're going to let me go? Let me go back to Arkham, so I can escape and do it all again? That's the real joke. No, Izuku said. The black whip tendrils tightened, constricting, their thorny surfaces digging into the Joker's suit. You will never hurt anyone again. You will never escape. You will never see the sun again. You will never tell another joke. He paused, his gaze forensic, analytical. I will make sure of it. What followed was not a fight. It was a deconstruction, with a cold, terrifying precision that could only come from years of analyzing quirks and anatomy. Izuku went to work. He didn't punch. He didn't blast. He used his immense power with the focused accuracy of a scalpel. One for all pulsed, not as an explosion, but as a series of sharp, controlled impacts. There was the sickening wet snap of the Joker's right radius, and ulna breaking. A choked gasp from the clown, then the left. Black Whip shifted, pinning his legs. Izuku's fingers, glowing with green energy, pressed against the Joker's kneecaps. There were two sharp cracks, and the Joker screamed, a high, piercing sound of pure agony. You see, I've studied the human body, Izuku said, his voice as calm and detached as a surgeon's. I know every bone, every ligament, every nerve. I know exactly how much pressure it takes to break them, and I know how to break them in a way that they will never, ever heal properly. He moved with a brutal, efficient grace. He systematically dislocated every joint in the Joker's fingers, then shattered the small bones within, ensuring he could never hold a weapon, or even a pen, again. He snapped his clavicles. He used a precise, contained burst of kinetic energy from Fag to rupture the Joker's vocal cords, not enough to kill him, but enough to reduce his iconic, soul-scraping laughter to a pained, wheezing gurgle for the rest of his life. Throughout it all, the Joker writhed and choked, his eyes wide with a terror he had never known. Pain was part of his act, something to be laughed at. But this was different. This wasn't chaotic. It was methodical. It was absolute. It was the complete and utter dismantling of his physical self by a hero who refused to kill, but had found something far, far worse. Finally, it was over. Black Whip gently lowered the broken, whimpering mass that was once the Joker to the floor. He was a heap of broken limbs and shattered pride, conscious and aware of every agonizing injury. Izuku stood over him, not a shred of satisfaction on his face. Only a vast, empty coldness. The door opened. Batman stood there, his face unreadable. He had heard the screams. He had seen, on his own thermal sensors, what had transpired. Izuku didn't look at him. He looked down at the pathetic creature on the floor. He will be transferred to a purpose-built facility, Izuku stated, his voice devoid of any emotion. A concrete box, buried a mile beneath the earth. No light. No sound. He will be fed through a tube. He will live the rest of his miserable life alone in the dark, with nothing but the memory of what he did. He finally turned to face Batman. The abyss in his eyes was still there, but it was no longer chaotic. It was focused. It was the look of a man who had stared into the void and had not blinked. He had drawn a line in the sand. He hadn't crossed the one everyone expected, the one that separated hero from murderer. He had erased that line and drawn a new one, somewhere far more terrifying and unknown. This world's way of dealing with monsters like him is a joke, Izuku said, his gaze unwavering. Revolving doors and prisons. Therapy for souls that are already empty. Never again. I will not let this happen again. I will protect this world. From them. And from itself. He walked past Batman, the crackle of his power a low, constant hum. He didn't look back at the broken man on the floor, or the hero standing in the doorway. He was already looking forward, at a future he would now forge with his own two hands, whether the world wanted him to or not. As he walked out into the weeping Gotham night, Batman finally looked down at the Joker. The clown prince of crime tried to say something, to spit one last piece of defiance. But all that came out was a wet, pathetic gurgle, his mouth filling with blood. His eyes, for the first time in his life, were not filled with madness or glee. They were filled with the purest terror. He had finally met something that he couldn't comprehend. A hero who would not kill, but would deliver a fate far worse than death. A savior who had decided that salvation, by his definition, was absolute. Batman looked from the broken villain to the empty doorway where the broken hero had stood. He had feared that Izuku would become a killer. He realized now that he had feared the wrong thing. Izuku Midoriya hadn't crossed the line. He had taken the line with him, and was about to wrap it around the entire world. The first week was silence. A silence so profound it was a presence, a heavy blanket of ash and quiet that smothered the world. The news channels played the same horrific, silent footage on a loop, a satellite view of a continental coastline, and then a blossoming, cancerous light that erased the metropolis. The name Izuku Midoriya was spoken only in hushed, terrified whispers. He had vanished. Some thought he had died in the blast. Others, more fearful, believed he had fled in shame. The truth was far simpler, and far more terrible. He had gone home. Metropolis was no longer a city. It was a wound. A vast, circular crater, miles wide, scarred the earth. The edges were a clawed ruin of twisted steel and melted glass, skeletal skyscrapers slumping into the abyss. At the epicenter, the ground had been fused into a dark, obsidian sheen, and in the center of that glass plane, for days on end, a lone green figure moved with a terrible, ceaseless purpose. Izuku worked. He did not eat. He did not sleep. He simply moved. He lifted incomprehensibly heavy slabs of concrete and steel, objects that would require an entire team of heavy machinery, and set them aside with the delicate precision of a watchmaker. He was searching. His danger sense, once a sharp alarm for incoming threats, was now a dull, permanent throb in his skull, the echo of a million silent screams. He knew, with an analytical certainty that was a curse, that there was no one to find. He had been in orbit. He had seen the thermal bloom. He understood the physics of a nuclear detonation. Survival was not a variable, and yet he searched. His hero costume, once a vibrant symbol, was now caked in a uniform gray dust that seemed to suck the very color from it. Each day, he would clear a new section of the ruin, his movements economical, his face a mask of empty concentration. He was running a diagnostic on his own failure. Each piece of debris was a data point. This was a girder from the Daily Planet building. Lena had loved the view from its roof. This was a melted fragment of a park bench. He and Lena had sat there last spring, eating ice cream. This was a scorched, metal husk that might have been a stroller. He methodically catalogued the evidence of the world he had failed to protect, the cold, hard logic of it a bulwark against the tidal wave of grief that threatened to drown him. It was during the fourth day of this grim, self-imposed penance that she found him. Diana Prince descended from the sky not in a flash of divine power, but with a quiet grace, landing softly on the glass-strewn ground a few yards away. She was in full Amazonian armor, her expression one of deep, empathetic sorrow. "Izuku," she said, her voice soft but clear in the oppressive silence. He didn't stop. He hefted a 10-ton piece of a collapsed freeway overpass, the muscles in his back cording with the effort, and placed it onto a growing pile. "There is nothing for you here, Diana," he replied, his voice a dry rasp. He hadn't spoken in days. "I came for you," she said, taking a step closer. "We are worried. Bruce, Barry, all of us. You cannot bear this burden alone." "This is not a burden," he said, turning to face her for the first time. His eyes were the scariest part. The lightning was gone. The vibrant green had cooled to a flat, lifeless jade. They were the eyes of a surgeon looking at a terminal patient. "It is a result. An outcome based on a flawed methodology." Diana frowned, confused. "Methodology? Izuku, this was the act of a madman. It was not a flaw in your methods. It was an act of pure evil, is it?" he countered, his gaze sweeping across the vast desolation. "The Joker is a chaotic variable, yes. But the system allowed him to exist. It allowed him to fester. The entire world, it is a system riddled with chaotic variables. War. Crime. Greed. Hate. Humanity's capacity for self-destruction is an inherent, systemic flaw." He began to walk, forcing her to fall into step beside him. He moved through the ruins of his life like a professor giving a lecture. "I have been analyzing," he continued, his tone chillingly detached. In my world, we had a saying from a very old hero textbook, meddling when you don't need to is the essence of being a hero. I believe that. React. Save. Inspire. Hope that people will choose the right path. He stopped and picked up a small, fused object from the ground. It was a child's toy, a small rocket ship, now a melted lump of plastic. He stared at it for a moment, and for a fraction of a second, a flicker of the old pain crossed his face before being ruthlessly suppressed. Hope is not a strategy, he said, his fingers closing around the toy, crushing it into dust. It is a gamble. And I have learned the price of losing. So what is your answer? Diana asked, a note of apprehension in her voice. Vengeance? You already delivered that. Vengeance is an emotional response. It is inefficient, he said, turning his cold eyes back to her. This requires a logical one. The problem is not the villains. They are merely the symptom. The problem is the chaos. The problem is the freedom to inflict suffering. The system itself must be changed. He looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw not a broken boy, but a man who had found a new, terrible purpose in the embers of his grief. The world needs a shield, an absolute, infallible defense against its own worst instincts. It needs a constant, not a variable. It has heroes for that, Diana said, her hand instinctively going to the hilt of her sword. Heroes react. Izuku corrected her. I will be proactive. I will not wait for the next Joker, the next civil war, the next act of terror. I will stop them before they are even conceived. I will create a world where a tragedy like Metropolis is not just unlikely, but impossible. A cold dread settled in Diana's stomach. She had seen this before, in ancient tales of gods who loved humanity so much they sought to chain it for its own good. It never ended well. You cannot force peace upon people, Izuku. True peace must be chosen. They have been choosing for millennia, he said, gesturing to the crater around them, a gesture that encompassed all of human history. And this is the result. Their choices are flawed. I will make the right choice for them. For all of them. He paused, his voice dropping slightly. All Might gave me his power to save people. I thought that meant saving them from falling buildings and villains. I was wrong. It means saving them from themselves. I will not fail his legacy again. He turned and looked towards the hazy, dust-choked horizon. Tell the others. I will be making a statement. The world will need to listen. With that, he rose into the air, a silent, grim specter ascending from his own grave. Diana was left standing alone in the ruins, the profound silence suddenly feeling like the deep breath the world was taking before a scream. 2 weeks later he appeared. The General Assembly Hall of the United Nations in New York was a hornet's nest of controlled panic. Every major world leader, every influential ambassador, was present. They had been summoned not by an official request, but by a simple, untraceable message that had appeared on every screen in the building simultaneously. I will speak at noon. You will listen. The media was in a frenzy. The entire planet was watching. Was this a declaration of war? A plea for forgiveness? An abdication? No one knew. Security was at an impossible level, yet everyone felt utterly, hopelessly vulnerable. At precisely 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, he materialized. He didn't walk through a door or descend from the ceiling. One moment, the space in front of the great green marble podium was empty. The next, he was there. He stood perfectly still, a statue carved from grief. His costume was pristine, the green dark and menacing under the hall's bright lights. His face was clean-shaven, his wild hair tamed. He looked formal, resolute. But his eyes held the cold, ancient stillness of a frozen sea. The familiar, hopeful smile that had defined him was a ghost, a memory from a different age. A collective gasp went through the chamber. Phones were raised, cameras flashed, but a heavy, fearful silence quickly fell. He scanned the faces of the assembled leaders, his gaze lingering for a fraction of a second on each one. It was not the look of a petitioner or an ally. It was the look of a physician assessing a disease. Finally he spoke, his voice amplified by some unseen power, clear and devoid of inflection, reaching every corner of the hall and every speaker across the globe. My name is Izuku Midoriya. To you, I am known as Deku. For 3 years I have served this world as a hero. 3 weeks ago, I failed in that duty." He did not apologize. He stated it as fact. The city of Metropolis, and the 11 million souls who called it home, are gone. They are gone because of the actions of one man, and the inaction of a world that has proven, time and time again, that it is incapable of protecting itself from its own worst elements. We build weapons to foster peace. We elect leaders who promise prosperity while their people starve. We cherish freedom, and watch as that freedom is used to sow hatred, to incite violence, to burn cities to the ground for the sake of a madman's joke. He took a step forward, his presence seeming to fill the entire vast chamber. The old ways have failed. The hope that humanity will, on its own, choose peace over conflict is a fantasy. The trust that your governments, your armies, your laws can prevent the next catastrophe is a lie you tell yourselves to sleep at night. I am telling you now, the night is over. And you are not safe. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few delegates began to speak angrily to their aides. Izuku ignored them completely. I have the power to end all conflict. I have the speed to disarm every soldier in every nation before they can pull a trigger. I have the strength to hold back the tides and quell the storms. I have the will to see it done. I have spent my life as a student of heroes. The greatest lesson I have learned is this: a hero's duty is to save everyone. Not to ask. Not to hope. To save. He raised his hand, palm open. A holographic image of the earth materialized above it, spinning slowly. Therefore, effective immediately, I am enacting a new global security initiative. I am calling it the Aegis Protocol. The age of nations is over. The endless cycle of war and fragile truce is over. I will be this world's shield. Your armies will be dismantled. Your nuclear arsenals will be disposed of. All violent, organized crime will be systematically eradicated. Any government or organization that resists, that seeks to perpetuate conflict for its own gain, will be removed. The hall erupted. Shouts of tyranny and "This is an act of war" echoed from the delegates. The President of the United States stood up, his face purple with rage. "You do not have the authority," he yelled, his voice cracking. Izuku's cold eyes locked onto him. The President froze, the words dying in his throat. He sat back down as if pushed by an invisible hand. "Your authority is granted by pieces of paper." Izuku's voice cut through the noise, silencing the chamber once more. "Mine is not. My authority comes from the simple, undeniable fact that I can, and I will, create a world where no other child has to watch their home turn to ash on a television screen. A world where no one has to feel what I felt." He looked out at them, at the sea of powerful, frightened faces. "This is not a debate. This is not a proposal. You will not vote on it. This is a new beginning. Your people will be safe. Your children will grow up without fear. The only price is a peace you are too proud or too corrupt to forge for yourselves." He closed his hand, and the hologram of the earth vanished. "I am not asking for your permission," he said, his voice dropping to a final, chilling whisper that every person on the planet heard as if he were standing right next to them. "I am offering you salvation. The protocol is now in effect." And then, he was gone. He vanished as silently as he had appeared, leaving behind a world plunged into chaos, a room full of powerless leaders, and the terrifying, absolute certainty that everything had changed. The world did not have to wait long to see if he was serious. 1:01 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Khaznian Valley. For 6 years, the Republic of Khaznia had been tearing itself apart. The loyalist forces of the old regime and the populist rebels of the new were locked in a brutal, bloody civil war. In a muddy, cratered valley on the northern border, two massive armies were poised for what was to be the final, decisive battle. Tanks churned the earth. Artillery cannons were sighted. 10,000 soldiers on each side stared across a no-man's land, their fingers on their triggers. The order to charge was given. Horns blared. A wave of men and machines surged forward, and then the sky turned green. Izuku descended not like a man, but like a storm. He moved faster than a thought. One moment he was a speck in the sky, the next he was a blur of motion on the battlefield. He did not kill. He did not injure. He disarmed. Black whip erupted from his body in 1,000 dark green tendrils. They moved with serpentine speed, plucking rifles from hands, dismantling machine gun nests, and wrapping around the barrels of tanks, twisting them into useless knots of steel. He moved through the ranks of the charging soldiers in a silent, cyclonic rush. A soldier would raise his weapon, and in the blink of an eye, it would be gone, vanished, added to a growing, mountainous pile of confiscated hardware in the center of the valley. The entire process took 17 seconds. 20,000 soldiers stood, stunned and weaponless, in the mud. The engines of their tanks sputtered and died as Izuku, with a touch, overloaded their electronics. He floated above them, a silent, emerald judge. He said nothing. He simply hovered there, his presence an absolute, undeniable veto to their war. Terrified, confused, and utterly defeated without a single shot being fired, the soldiers began to lower their hands. Some dropped to their knees, weeping with a strange, cathartic relief. On satellite feeds in war rooms in Washington, Moscow, and Beijing, military generals watched with slack-jawed horror and disbelief. H6:06 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Global. The criminal underworld felt his wrath next. He did not target street-level thugs. He targeted the head of the snake. All of them. At once. In a penthouse in Hong Kong, the head of the triads was in a meeting when the windows imploded and a green gale ripped through the room, leaving him and his lieutenants bound in unbreakable black tendrils. In a fortified villa in Sicily, the Don of the Costa Nostra family found himself suddenly dangling upside down from the ceiling of his own wine cellar. He hit Intergang the hardest. For decades they had used their alien technology and vast criminal network to operate with near impunity. Izuku treated them like a puzzle to be solved. In a simultaneous, coordinated series of events that defied physics, he struck at every major Intergang node on the planet. He phased through the walls of their data centers, not destroying them, but instantly downloading terabytes of encrypted information, his mind processing it faster than any supercomputer. He appeared in their weapons caches, not blowing them up, but dismantling their advanced technology piece by piece and leaving it in neat, useless piles. The leader of Intergang, Bruno Mannheim, was in his bunker 5 stories beneath Metropolis's sister city, Bloodhaven. He was watching the news reports from Kaznia with a smug grin, believing himself untouchable. A sonic boom shook the entire bunker, and the meter-thick titanium door to his command center was peeled open like a tin can. Izuku stood in the doorway, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. He said nothing. Mannheim didn't even have time to scream. The world watched on the news as, one by one, the most feared criminal empires on the planet were decapitated, their leaders appearing, bound and defeated, on the steps of local police stations. H14:02 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The Philippine Sea. The tsunami was born from a magnitude 9.2 earthquake deep beneath the ocean floor. It was a monster, a wall of water 300 feet high, moving at 500 miles per hour towards the eastern coast of the Philippines. Evacuations were underway, but millions were in its path. It was an unstoppable act of God, until it met one. Izuku arrived as the wave was mere miles from the coastline. He didn't try to punch it. He didn't try to freeze it. He flew directly in front of it, a tiny green speck against a moving mountain of dark water. He braced himself in the air, legs apart, arms forward. He unleashed one for all, not as a destructive blast, but as a sustained, incredible force. He became a living breakwater. The colossal waves slammed into an invisible, unmovable wall of pure kinetic energy. The sound was a continuous, world-shattering roar as the tsunami's momentum warred with a power forged from 9 generations of heroes. For a full minute that felt like an eon, the man held back the ocean. The water churned and boiled around him, but the line held. Then, slowly, with unimaginable control, he began to push. He didn't just stop the wave. He dissipated its energy, calming the sea itself. On the shore, the millions who had been bracing for oblivion watched in stunned, tearful silence as the great wave receded, tamed by their new, terrifying savior. A lone news helicopter captured the image that would define the new era, a single man, floating in the sky, calmly holding back the wrath of the planet. The next morning, the world was different. The Kaznian War was over. The stock markets, after a brief, panicked crash, soared to record highs at the prospect of a world without conflict. Crime rates had plummeted to near zero. And a new poll showed that 86% of the world's population approved of the Aegis Protocol. He was not a tyrant. He was not a conqueror. To the weeping mother in Manila whose children were now safe, to the young soldier in Casnia who would now go home to his family, to the shopkeeper in Naples no longer paying protection money to the mob, he was a god. A savior. A shield. The world, so recently afraid, was now falling in love with its beautiful, benevolent cage. And in the shadows, in a cave beneath the Gothic city, a man dressed as a bat watched the news reports, his face grim. He knew the price of this kind of peace. And he knew, with a terrible certainty, that he would have to be the one to fight a god the rest of the world adored. The resistance had just begun. The watchtower was no longer a place of camaraderie. The Round Table, where heroes had once gathered to share stories and strategize in a fellowship of equals, was now a place of silent, heavy judgment. The starlit void outside the panoramic windows seemed colder, the nebulae less vibrant. The station, once a symbol of unified hope, had become a fortress, a seat of power, the gilded cage from which the world was now governed. Izuku stood before the central holographic display, a shimmering globe of the earth hanging in the air before him. Information scrolled across its surface in emerald-green threads of light. Weather patterns, troop movements being monitored for disarmament, seismic activity, aggregated news feeds from 1,000 languages. He was a sentinel watching over his creation, his posture rigid, his focus absolute. He had not removed his hero costume in weeks. It was a uniform now, the armor of his new office. Wonder Woman stood beside him, her expression a complex mixture of awe and apprehension. She had seen the results of his Aegis protocol firsthand. She had flown over the verdant fields of Casnia where children now played on the rusting husks of abandoned tanks. She had walked the streets of Naples and seen the relief on the faces of people no longer living in the shadow of organized crime. He had accomplished in weeks what the Justice League had only dreamed of for years. He had brought peace. The final arms shipment from the Bialian military is being secured, she reported, her voice echoing slightly in the vast, silent chamber. Their generals offered no resistance. They saw what happened in Casnia. They are being logical, Izuku replied without turning. His eyes traced the developing weather pattern over the Indian Ocean. Resistance would be inefficient and ultimately futile. Logic dictates compliance. Is that what this is, Izuku? Diana asked, her voice soft but probing. Logic? Or is it control? He finally turned to face her, and his lifeless jade eyes held a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher. Was it frustration? Or was it the deep, weary pain that was the bedrock of this entire endeavor? It is a logical application of control to ensure a desired outcome, safety, he stated, the words precise and detached. Love, empathy, hope, they are beautiful ideals, Diana. But they are variables. They can be manipulated. They can fail. I am creating a system based on a constant. The constant is my ability to protect them. Before Diana could respond, a blur of red and gold lightning resolved into the form of Barry Allen. He skidded to a halt, his usual cheerful energy noticeably absent. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than they should be for a man his age. Okay, Izu, we need to talk, Barry said, running a hand through his hair. I just finished the global sweep you asked for. Dismantled another 20 contraband weapons labs from Argus's old black sites. But the things I'm hearing. The chatter on the streets. People are scared. They are safe, Izuku countered, his tone leaving no room for argument. Are they? Barry shot back, his voice rising. I was in Central City. A guy was arrested. Not by the cops. By one of your new automated drones. His crime? He was yelling at a city councilman in a public square. He was angry, sure. But he didn't have a weapon. He wasn't violent. The drone classified his tone and rhetoric as pre-insurrectionist behavior. Izuku's expression remained unchanged. The drone's algorithm is designed to identify and neutralize potential threats before they escalate. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. An ounce of prevention is not worth a pound of freedom, Barry exclaimed, his hands gesturing wildly. We're arresting people for yelling now? For being angry? That's not protecting them, Izuku. That's thought policing. Anger is the emotion that led the Joker to do what he did, Izuku said, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. The temperature in the room seemed to drop with it. Anger is the seed of conflict. If I can root out the seed, the poisonous tree will never grow. That's not how people work, Barry pleaded. You can't just delete their feelings because you're afraid of what they might do. I am not afraid, Izuku stated, and it was the most chilling thing he had said yet, because Diana and Barry both knew it was true. He had moved beyond fear into a realm of pure, cold, grief-fueled certainty. I am responsible. It was into this tense standoff that a new voice, laced with the metallic tinge of a vocoder, spoke. He is right, Barry. Cyborg Victor Stone strode into the room. His glowing red eye scanned the holographic globe, his cybernetic systems interfacing directly with the data stream. My analysis confirms Izuku's projections. Global stability is at 99.7%. Violent crime is down 92%. The probability of armed conflict between nations within the next century has dropped to statistically zero. The numbers don't lie. The system, it works. Diana looked from Victor's cold, data-driven support to Barry's passionate, humanistic fear. The League, the very heart of this team, was fracturing right in front of her. Clark was still off-world on a mission that had begun before the Metropolis tragedy. Hal was with the Green Lantern Corps, wrestling with the Guardian's official stance on Izuku's actions. They were a house divided. And one member was conspicuously, ominously absent. The rain in Gotham was a constant, sorrowful whisper. It slicked the stone of the gargoyles and ran in dirty rivers down the alleyways. In the deepest, most secret level of the Batcave, the rain was a distant, unheard memory. Here, there was only the low hum of the Bat computer, the drip of water from the cavern roof, and the heavy silence of a gathering storm. Bruce Wayne stood before the central monitor, not in his cowl, but in a simple gray training shirt and tactical pants. The screen was split into a dozen windows, each displaying a facet of Izuku's new world order. Drone patrols over London. Automated checkpoints in Tokyo. News reports praising the miracle of Metropolis, a term coined for the rapid, super-powered reconstruction of the city center into a gleaming, sterile memorial park. He was watching the birth of a perfect, peaceful tyranny, and his face was a mask of grim resolve. A quiet chime announced a visitor. A section of the cave wall slid away, revealing a hidden elevator. The doors opened, and Oliver Queen and Dinah Lance, Green Arrow and Black Canary, stepped out. Oliver's usual devil-may-care smirk was gone, replaced by a deep-seated anger. Dinah's eyes, usually so full of life and fire, were clouded with worry. Bruce, Oliver began, foregoing any pleasantries as he gestured to the screens. You're seeing this, right? He's not just stopping wars. He's stopping everything. Protests in Cairo, union strikes in Detroit. They're being broken up by his drones before they even start. They call it maintaining public order. It's the quiet that's getting to me, Dinah added, her voice a low, troubled hum. The streets are safe, but they're silent. People are afraid to speak their minds. They're afraid to raise their voices. As someone who uses their voice for a living, it feels like the world is holding its breath, scared to make a sound that might get them noticed. He's created a panopticon, Bruce said, his voice a low growl. He turned from the screen to face them. He's using his danger sense not just as a defensive tool, but as a global, biological surveillance system. He can sense spikes in adrenaline, aggression, and fear on a massive scale. Combined with Cyborg's global data mining and the League's surveillance tech, he doesn't have to wait for a crime to be committed. He can feel the intent to commit one. Oliver ran a hand over his goatee in disbelief. So he's literally psychic police? That's it. Game over? No, Bruce said, his voice hard as iron. It's the beginning of a new fight. He's trying to build a perfect world, but he's forgotten that perfection is a cage. Humanity doesn't grow in a sterile lab. It grows in the messy, chaotic, often painful soil of choice and consequence. So what's the plan, Bruce? Dinah asked, crossing her arms. We can't fight him. Not head-on. He's on another level. He took down Kaznia's army in the time it takes to make toast. What can we do? We don't fight him. Bruce said, a flicker of his tactical genius cutting through the gloom. Not yet. We fight his system. We remind people what they're losing. We show them that a gilded cage is still a cage. We become an insurgency. Not of violence, but of ideology. He walked over to a massive, steel-reinforced locker and entered a code. The door hissed open, revealing rows of equipment, new, non-lethal arrows for Oliver, sonic dampeners and scramblers for Dinah, and for himself, a new suit of armor. It was darker, heavier, reinforced with materials designed not to fight Kryptonians, but to disrupt energy fields and mask biological signatures. He's dismantled the world's armies, but he's left the infrastructure, Bruce explained, his plan taking shape in the air between them. He thinks he's the only one who can use it. We'll prove him wrong. We'll be ghosts in his machine. We will defend the very people he's trying to save, defend them from their savior. Oliver picked up a newly designed arrow, its tip a complex bundle of electronics. And the rest of the League? What about them? Diana still believes she can reason with him, Bruce said, his voice edged with a rare note of sadness. Barry is afraid, but he's more afraid of opposing Izuku than he is of the world he's building. Vic is lost to the logic of the machine. They will not help us. He looked at them, his gaze intense. We're on our own. Dinah met his gaze without flinching. No. We're not. Her voice was quiet but firm. There are others. People who remember what the world was like before. People who value a messy freedom over a perfect prison. You just have to call. A ghost of a smile, so faint it was barely there, touched Bruce's lips. I already have. He tapped a key on his console. 2 more figures appeared on the main screen in a secure video link. Captain Atom, his face a mask of solemn duty, and a surprising, almost shocking face, Harley Quinn. She was dressed not in her usual jester costume, but in simple, civilian clothes, her hair tied back. The manic energy was gone, replaced by a haunted, somber expression. I'm in, Captain Atom said, his voice resolute. My loyalty is to the Constitution and the people, not to a single man, no matter how powerful. What he's doing is a violation of every principle I've sworn to defend. All eyes turned to Harley. Look, she said, her voice rough. My Puddin', he was a monster. I know that. But his whole thing was about chaos. About proving there were no rules. This, she shuddered, gesturing vaguely. This is the opposite of that. This is all rules. This is a world with no punchlines. It's a world where a guy like Mr. J could never exist. And as much as I hate what he did, this quiet, gray, safe world he's building, it's giving me the creeps. It's not living. It's just not dying. She took a deep breath. The Joker wanted to prove everyone could be as crazy as him. This kid, he's proving that everyone can be made sane. And I don't know which is scarier. So yeah? I'm in. Whatever you need to do to mess up his perfect little dollhouse, I'll help. Bruce nodded, closing the link. He looked at Oliver and Dinah. The first cracks in Izuku's perfect world were forming. They would be the ones to hammer in the wedges. The debate came to a head a week later, in the ruins of the Watchtower's original training room. Izuku had ordered it left as it was after a minor skirmish with a Parenon scout party weeks before the tragedy, a reminder of their constant vigilance. Now, the scorch marks and cracked walls felt like a fitting backdrop for the ideological war tearing the Justice League apart. Bruce had come to make one last appeal. He had bypassed the Watchtower's main security, a silent message in itself, and found Izuku meditating, floating cross-legged in the center of the ruined room. It has to stop, Izuku, Bruce said, his voice flat, dispensing with greetings. Izuku's eyes opened. They were calm, clear. I failed to see the logic in your position, Bruce. The world is at peace. It's the peace of a graveyard. Bruce countered, stepping over a piece of rubble. You've stopped wars by taking away the choice to wage them. You've stopped crime by taking away the privacy that allows it to fester. You're treating the symptoms by killing the patient. The patient was already dying, Izuku said, floating down to stand on the floor. He was shorter than Bruce, but the sheer power radiating from him made him seem like a giant. I've put it into a medically induced coma to allow it to heal. You haven't! Bruce's voice rose, the carefully controlled baritone cracking with raw passion. You're just calling the coma health. You're taking away their right to choose, their right to make their own mistakes. A world without pain, Izuku, is a world without growth. A world without challenge is a world without heroes. You're not saving them, you're caging them, and you would see them free to tear each other apart? Izuku shot back, the first spark of heat entering his voice. Free to build bombs? Free to let another Joker slip through the cracks and burn another city? I have seen the ultimate consequence of that freedom. I held it in my arms as it died. I will not let that happen again. Tragedy doesn't give you the right to become a tyrant. Compassion doesn't give you the right to let it happen again. The two men stood inches apart, a storm of green energy crackling around Izuku, a storm of sheer, indomitable will emanating from Bruce. They were two sides of the same coin, two orphans forged by tragedy, who had chosen paths that were now diametrically, violently opposed. I analyze you, Bruce, Izuku said, his voice dropping again to that cold, analytical tone. Your methods. Your history. You've held your line. You don't kill. I respect that. I even emulated it. But your refusal to take decisive action, your belief in a system that repeatedly fails, has allowed countless tragedies to unfold. Your way is a noble failure. I am choosing an ignoble success. There is no success without freedom, Bruce growled. You're so afraid of the darkness, you're willing to extinguish all the light to get rid of it. This isn't heroism. It's control. It's what's necessary, Izuku stated. The words hung in the air, an unbreakable, undeniable wall between them. This was an ideological chasm that could not be bridged. Bruce took a step back, the fury in his eyes hardening into a cold, diamond-hard resolve. Then you are no longer a hero. You are a threat. And I will stop you. For the first time since Metropolis, Izuku looked genuinely hurt. The cold facade cracked for a brief second, revealing the grieving boy beneath. Bruce, don't do this. I'm trying to build a better world. Why are you trying to tear it down? Because a better world built on a foundation of fear is a prison, Bruce said, his voice heavy with the weight of his decision. He turned his back on Izuku, a gesture of finality more powerful than any blow. I am hereby tendering my resignation from the Justice League. As of now, consider me your enemy. He walked towards the exit of the ruined room. You cannot win, Bruce, Izuku said to his back. It wasn't a boast. It was a statement of fact, a sad, logical conclusion. I can see every move you make. I can anticipate every strategy. I am faster, stronger. Opposing me is illogical. Bruce stopped at the doorway but didn't turn around. And that's your mistake, Izuku, he said, his voice a low, ominous promise. You think this is a fight that can be won with logic and power. He finally looked back over his shoulder, his eyes shadowed but burning with a fierce, defiant light. You've forgotten what it's like to be human. I haven't. He was gone, a shadow melting into other shadows. Izuku was left alone in the center of the ruins, the quiet hum of the watchtower his only companion. The hurt on his face slowly receded, replaced once more by the mask of cold resolve. He had analyzed the probability of Bruce's descent. It had been high. He had hoped to avoid it. But hope was a variable. The mission was the constant. He turned back to the center of the room, closed his eyes, and began to float once more. He expanded his senses, the network of his perception spreading across the globe like an invisible net. He could feel the pulse of humanity, the quiet, orderly hum of his new world. But now, for the first time, he could also feel a discordant note in the symphony. A ghost in the machine. A crack in the perfect peace. Bruce was out there. The insurgency was forming, his face hardened. The crack would have to be sealed. The dissonance would have to be silenced. For the good of the world. For their own protection. No matter the cost. The world was a constant, thrumming hum in the back of Izuku Midoriya's mind. He no longer perceived time in days or nights, but in a continuous, unbroken stream of data. He sat, or rather, floated, in the repurposed heart of the watchtower. The round table was gone, replaced by a single, throne-like command chair suspended in the center of a holographic sphere that depicted the Earth in real time. He was the nexus, the central processing unit for the salvation of an entire species. His danger sense had evolved. It was no longer a simple alarm for immediate, personal threats. Through a combination of focused meditation and the sheer, world-spanning amplification provided by the Watchtower's sensor arrays, he had turned it into a planetary early warning system. It was a symphony of human discord, and he was its sole, unwilling conductor. A spike in adrenaline in a Madrid alleyway was a sharp, ing B-flat. He would dispatch a silent, automated Aegis drone to interrupt the mugging before the knife was even drawn. The rising cortisol levels of an escalating bar fight in Dublin was a muddy, chaotic chord. He would have local law enforcement, now under his global command, intervene with non-lethal pacifiers. The low, rumbling sea of a domestic dispute in Seoul, the fear and aggression a palpable texture in his mind. A drone would project a calming sonic frequency into the apartment, while a remote social worker initiated a mandatory wellness call. He was a human server, processing 1 billion lives a second. Sleep was an unnecessary luxury, a system inefficiency he had eliminated. Sustenance came from nutrient pastes and 4 drips managed by the station's automated medical systems, administered while he worked. He was a ghost in a machine of his own making, his only purpose to monitor, to process, to prevent. He had become the algorithm of peace. His friends, the ones who remained, had tried to breach the wall of his focus. Diana would bring him food from Themyscira, which would sit untouched. Barry would zip in, rattling off a dozen jokes in a second, only to be met with a silent, focused stare before zipping away, his cheerful facade crumbling. Victor communicated with him purely through data streams now, their conversations stripped of all humanity, reduced to code and probability matrices. Izuku had pushed them all away, not out of malice, but out of a cold, hard logic. Emotional connection was a variable. It was a vulnerability. It was the crack in his armor that the Joker had exploited, and he had sealed it with the ashes of Metropolis. It was in the deep, silent hours of this endless vigil, when the hum of the world was at its quietest, that they began to speak to him. The first was Nana Shimura. She appeared not as a physical ghost, but as a whisper in the core of One for All, a warmth spreading through the cold data stream of his consciousness. He felt her presence as a pang of sorrow, a memory of a smile he had never seen but knew intimately. "This isn't strength, little one," her voice echoed in his mind, gentle but firm. It was the voice of a mother, a mentor, a hero who had died for the ideals he was now systematically dismantling. "You're holding the entire world so tightly you're suffocating it. And yourself." "I am protecting it," he subvocalized, his eyes never leaving the spinning globe. A potential border skirmish in a demilitarized zone was flaring up. He rerouted atmospheric satellites to project a series of intimidating, non-lethal energy warnings from the sky, scattering the would-be combatants. "Are you?" Nana's voice was laced with a profound sadness. "Or are you just preventing them from living? A hero is supposed to lift people up, to inspire them to be better. You are holding them down, forcing them to be peaceful. It's not the same, Izuku. It's not the same at all." Inspiration failed, he stated, the memory of Lena's frozen to a spike of ice in his soul. Hope was not enough. Another voice joined hers, this one rougher, more pragmatic. It was Daigoro Banjo, the 5th user, the wielder of Black Whip. "Hey, lay off the kid, Nana. You didn't see what he saw." Daigoro's presence felt like a calloused hand on his shoulder, a grudging, tough love support. "He's doing what none of us could. He's actually winning. It ain't pretty, but it's working. The world's quiet. No more kids getting orphaned in some back-alley hero fight. And what is the cost, Daigoro?" A third voice, sharp and ancient, cut through. Haikid Shinomori, the 4th user, the man who had hidden from All for One, his essence radiating a lifetime of caution and paranoia. "He has made himself the single, greatest target in the universe. He has become a tyrant of order to fight a tyrant of chaos. All for One would be proud. He has created a world of puppets, a world without will. It is a cage painted to look like a paradise. It is a world without funerals." Izuku countered, his voice a harsh whisper in the silent command center. He felt them recoil from the sheer, unplumbed depth of his grief. They were the ghosts of his power, the vestiges of a legacy, but he was the one who was truly haunted. They could whisper warnings and offer debate, but he was the one who had to bear the weight. The weight of his failure. The weight of his solution. The weight of one for all, now twisted into a tool not of liberation, but of absolute, benevolent control. The symphony of his senses suddenly hit a sour, discordant note. A blip. A system anomaly. It wasn't a crime. It wasn't a natural disaster. It was a pocket of defiance, a carefully orchestrated, technologically masked operation in a remote corner of the Nevada desert. His drones in the area were being systematically blinded by localized EMPs. His satellite feeds were being looped. It was elegant, precise, and utterly infuriating. It was Bruce. The facility was one of Izuku's proudest, and most terrifying, creations. He called it the Tranquility Center. From the outside, it looked like a sterile, minimalist university campus set against the stark beauty of the desert. There were no walls, no barbed wire, no guard towers. There didn't need to be. The security was invisible and absolute. Inside were the first patients of the Aegis Protocol. They were not criminals in the traditional sense. They were dissidents. A journalist from Germany who had written scathing, viral articles calling Deku a benevolent dictator. A sociology professor from Japan whose lectures on the philosophical dangers of enforced peace were gaining traction online. An American activist who had tried to organize a protest march for the freedom to choose. They were people whose ideas were deemed dangerous, whose words were classified as potential sparks in the tinderbox of his new world order. They were not tortured. They were not harmed. They were being re-educated. They lived in comfortable rooms, were fed well, and attended daily sessions of behavioral therapy designed to realign their perspectives with global stability. Their aggression was being chemically smoothed over, their defiance psychotherapeutically dismantled. It was a clean, quiet, soul-crushing prison. Batman's insurgency moved like ghosts. Arrow, status on the perimeter sensors? Batman's voice was a calm, gravelly whisper over their encrypted comms. Sensors are down. Oliver Queen's voice came back, equally quiet. He was perched on a rocky outcrop a mile away. A specialized arrow knocked in his bow. Fired a wide-burst EMP arrow. They'll be blind for a 6-minute window, but any longer, and their system will flag the outage. Dinah, you're up. On the ground, crouched behind a low-lying service conduit, Black Canary took a deep breath. She focused, and let out a short, perfectly pitched sonic burst, too high for human ears to register. It wasn't her devastating canary cry. It was a precise frequency designed to overload the audio pickups of the nearby Aegis drones, sending them into a temporary diagnostic cycle. Drones are deaf and dumb, she reported. You've got 4 minutes, Bruce. A shadow detached itself from other shadows. Batman, clad in his new, heavier armor, moved across the open ground with an impossible silence. He didn't bypass the main door. He placed the device on the wall, and a perfect, silent circle was cut from the reinforced concrete. Inside, the halls were white, sterile, and eerily quiet. The few human guards they encountered were not soldiers, but orderlies in white coats. Captain Adam, working remotely, caused a minor, controlled power surge in a different wing of the facility, drawing the orderlies away from the cell block. It was a classic misdirection. Harley Quinn, of all people, was their inside woman. She had allowed herself to be captured a week prior, feigning a relapse into madness. Her erratic behavior had gotten her transferred to the Tranquility Center for evaluation. Now, using a lockpick fashioned from the underwire of her bra, she was already working on the electronic locks of the other cells. Took you guys long enough, she muttered as Batman appeared at the end of the corridor. This place gives me the willies. It's too clean. Batman ignored her, moving to the main security console. His fingers flew across the interface, a flurry of motion as he bypassed layers of encryption that would have stumped any government on Earth. He wasn't just unlocking the doors, he was wiping the digital records of the prisoners, replacing them with corrupted files. He was erasing them from Izuku's system. Let's go, he commanded, his voice urgent. He led the 3 dazed dissidents, the journalist, the professor, the activist, down the corridor. They looked at him with a mixture of fear and awe. Who are you? The German journalist stammered. A variable. Batman grunted, pushing them towards the opening he had cut. They were almost clear when it happened. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of ozone. A low, terrifying hum vibrated through the building. The lights flickered and died, plunging the hallway into emergency red lighting. On the comms, Oliver's voice was tight with panic. "Oh God! Bruce, get out of there! He's here!" Izuku descended from the sky like a vengeful god. The desert air crackled around him, superheated by the sheer power he was emitting. He landed silently in front of the hole in the wall just as Batman was helping the last dissident out. The two titans of this new age stood face to face. Batman, a mortal man who had weaponized the darkness. Izuku, a godlike boy drowning in a grief as vast as the sky. "This was illogical, Bruce," Izuku said, his voice a dead calm that was more terrifying than any shout. His eyes glowed with a furious, cold green light. "You have taken unstable elements and are attempting to reintroduce them into a stable system. This is an act of sabotage. Not against me. Against peace. This is a rescue, Izuku," Batman growled, stepping in front of the frightened dissidents, shielding them with his own body. "I'm saving these people from your peace. Saving them?" Izuku took a step forward, and the ground beneath his feet cracked. "This journalist you've saved wrote articles that fostered paranoia and dissent, leading to riots in Berlin that injured 17 people before I contained them. This professor's rhetoric was radicalizing students, creating a nascent terrorist cell in Tokyo. This activist was planning a march that my projections showed had a 78.4% chance of being targeted by extremist factions, leading to mass casualties. I wasn't imprisoning them, Bruce. I was preventing the fires they would have started." "You don't get to make that choice," Batman retorted, dropping into a low, defensive stance. "You don't get to silence people because you're afraid of what they might say. That's the definition of tyranny. It is the definition of responsibility." Izuku roared, the mask of calm finally cracking. Black whip tendrils, thick and thorny, erupted from his back, lashing out and smashing into the desert floor around him. "A responsibility you have shirked your entire career. You lock them up, they get out. You fight them, they come back stronger. Your way is a revolving door of tragedy. I have finally built a world that is safe, and you are trying to tear it down with your sentimental, outdated attachment to a chaotic ideal you call freedom." He raised a hand, and a wave of pure kinetic force erupted from it. It wasn't a punch. It was a statement. The ground in front of Batman exploded, sending a shower of rock and sand into the air, creating a deep trench between them. "Take them and go," Izuku said, his voice returning to its icy calm. "But know this. This is your only warning. You are not freeing anyone. You are endangering everyone. Do it again, and I will not be so lenient. I will remove you from the equation. Permanently." Batman stared at him across the newly formed chasm. He saw the absolute, unshakable conviction in Izuku's eyes. He had known this would be a fight, but he had underestimated the philosophical wall his former friend had built around himself. Arguing with him was like arguing with a tidal wave. Without another word, Batman deployed a smoke pellet. Thick, lead-lined smoke designed to block thermal and energy signatures filled the area. By the time Izuku blew it away with a flick of his wrist, they were gone. He stood there for a moment, the red emergency lights of his broken facility washing over him. He felt the whispers of the vestiges again. Nana was weeping. Haikage was silent, his worst fears realized. Daigoro was grumbling, a sound of conflicted frustration. Izuku ruthlessly suppressed them. They were echoes. Ghosts. They didn't understand the weight of the present. He turned and looked at the damage. The hole in the wall. The disabled drones. The corrupted files. It was a messy, inefficient outcome. He was fast enough to stop any single threat, but he could not be everywhere at once. The insurgency had proven they could be a hydra, striking from multiple, unpredictable directions. A human solution was fallible. It was then that Diana landed behind him. She must have been monitoring the situation from the watchtower, and had come as soon as he'd left. She looked from the damage to his rigid back. "Izuku," she began, her voice full of a pained disappointment that cut deeper than any of Batman's accusations. "You built a prison for people who think differently than you. Don't you see what you've become?" He turned to her, and his eyes were chips of jade. I see a system that was breached. I see a flaw in my methodology that needs to be corrected. This is not a methodology. This is about people, she pleaded, taking a step towards him. He freed them, Izuku. He gave them back their lives. He has unleashed variables, Izuku said, his voice utterly devoid of warmth. He has reintroduced the potential for chaos into a stable system. You see his actions as a defense of freedom. I see them as an act of profound negligence, no different than leaving a loaded weapon in a schoolyard. He has endangered millions for the sake of 3 people's right to start fires. Diana stared at him, horrified. The boy she had known, the earnest, emotional hero who cried when he saved people, was gone. In his place was this cold, logical creature who spoke of human lives as variables and freedom as negligence. If you believe that, she said, her voice trembling with a sorrowful fury, then you are truly lost. No, Diana, he replied, turning his back on her, a final, heartbreaking dismissal. I am the only one who has found the way. He looked out at the vast, empty desert, his mind already designing a solution to the problem Batman had presented. And if you cannot see that, then you are as blind as he is. He ascended into the sky, leaving her alone in the wreckage. He flew back to the watchtower, the weight of the world on his shoulders, the whispers of ghosts in his soul. He had been proven right. He couldn't be everywhere. A biological solution had its limits. He brought up the schematics. He began the protocols. If his own presence wasn't a sufficient deterrent, if the human element of law enforcement was too slow, then he would create a new one, an army of extensions of his will. In the watchtower's silent fabrication bays, assembly arms began to move. Chassis of advanced alloys were pieced together. Power cores hummed to life. Faceless, humanoid drones, each emblazoned with his once hopeful D-emblem, began to activate. They were silent, efficient, and utterly loyal. An army of Aegis enforcers, linked directly to his mind, capable of being anywhere and everywhere. He would no longer be the only guardian. He was building a million more in his own image. In the core of his being, the vestiges fell silent. Their arguments and warnings ceased. There was nothing left to say. They were now merely spectators to his fall, their legacy, their power, the very weight of one for all, now the engine of a perfect, peaceful, and soulless world. He was alone now, truly alone, holding the weight of a silent world and the judgment of ghosts.